Ambassador Kala stood before the massive holographic display in the Galactic Council chamber, her forearms trembling as she stared at what should have been impossible. The new territorial map of known space flickered before her, its blue-green glow illuminating the shocked faces of representatives from across the galaxy. Half the map, an unprecedented expanse covering 12 sectors, bore a single designation, Earth territory. "This cannot be accurate," growled Commander Tor, his reptilian features twisted in disbelief. "No single species has ever controlled more than 3 sectors. The humans arrived barely 2 centuries ago." Kyla's primary hands adjusted the display controls, while her secondary arms gestured helplessly. "The data has been verified 17 times. Human settlements, mining operations, research stations, and defensive platforms now span from the outer rim to the core worlds. They've established presence in systems we didn't even know existed." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, translators struggling to keep pace with the dozens of languages being spoken simultaneously. Some delegates accused the humans of aggression, others of deception. A few sat in stunned silence, calculating what this meant for their own territories. Order. The voice of High Counselor Vex boomed through the chamber's speakers. "We will examine this systematically. Ambassador Kala, please explain how this expansion occurred without our knowledge." Kala's tail swished nervously as she manipulated the hologram. "That's what troubles us most, High Counselor. There are no records of conquest, no reports of conflict. The humans didn't take these territories. They simply arrived. Their ships appeared in empty systems, established colonies, and began what they call infrastructure development." "Infrastructure for what?" demanded Senator Lin, her crystalline form refracting the map's light into rainbow patterns. "Everything," Kala replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mining asteroids we thought were worthless, terraforming planets we deemed uninhabitable, establishing trade routes through regions we considered impossible to navigate. They're not just occupying space, they're transforming it." The hologram shifted, showing detailed scans of human installations. Massive orbital platforms surrounded dead worlds, their surfaces now green with vegetation. Asteroid belts that had floated unchanged for millennia were now organized mining operations feeding raw materials to construction fleets. Most shocking of all were the transit networks, hyperspace lanes that connected distant regions, reducing travel time from years to weeks. Commander Tor's claws scraped against his chair's armrest. "How did they develop such technology so quickly?" "Our archives show they achieved faster-than-light travel only 3 centuries ago. That's barely enough time to explore a single sector properly." "That's what we need to understand, High Counselor," Vex said, his ancient voice heavy with concern. "The implications extend far beyond territorial expansion. If the humans have capabilities we've underestimated, it changes everything about galactic politics." Kala highlighted a section of the map showing the Meridian Expanse, a region notorious for its navigational hazards and resource scarcity. "This area has been considered worthless for 20,000 years. No species has managed to establish a permanent presence there. Yet human settlements are thriving throughout the entire region." The silence that followed was profound. Each representative contemplated what they were witnessing, not just territorial expansion, but a fundamental shift in what was considered possible. The humans weren't following the established patterns of galactic civilization. They were rewriting the rules entirely. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "We need answers," High Counselor Vex declared. "I'm authorizing a formal investigation. We must understand not just how this happened, but what it means for the future of our galactic community." Dr. Maya Chun, the human representative who had been quietly observing from the chamber's upper gallery, finally descended to the main floor. Her simple gray uniform contrasted sharply with the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by other delegates. Despite her unassuming appearance, every eye in the chamber followed her movement. High Counselor Vex, honorable delegates, Maya began, her voice carrying easily through the vast space without electronic amplification. I believe I can provide some clarity regarding your concerns. Commander Tor's laugh was harsh and skeptical. You've been sitting silently while we debate your species' unprecedented expansion. Now you offer clarity? Maya nodded calmly. We didn't speak earlier because we wanted to understand your perspective first. It's clear there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human expansion methods. She gestured toward the holographic map, and to everyone's surprise, it responded to her movements without any visible interface. The display zoomed in on a section showing human settlements in the void reaches, an area previously thought completely barren. What you're interpreting as territorial conquest is actually collaborative development, Maya explained. These aren't human territories, they're partnership projects with species you've never encountered because they don't use traditional communication methods or inhabit the planets you consider suitable for life. Senator Lin's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Impossible. We've surveyed these regions extensively. They're empty. Empty of what you recognize as life, Maya corrected gently, but filled with intelligence forms you haven't learned to detect. The Whisper Collective exists in quantum states within nebular formations. The root networks span entire asteroid belts through crystalline growth patterns. The time dancers inhabit the spaces between dimensions. She manipulated the display, revealing layers of data that had been invisible before. Suddenly, the apparently empty regions showed complex networks of activity energy patterns, growth structures, and movement trajectories that formed intricate civilizations. Humans have one unique trait among known galactic species, Maya continued. We don't just adapt to environments, we learn to perceive them differently. Our neuroplasticity allows us to recognize intelligence patterns that other species categorize as natural phenomena. Ambassador Kala's forearms gestured frantically at the new data. How is this possible? Our sensors detected none of these entities because your sensor technology is designed to detect life as you understand it, Maya replied. Carbon-based organisms, electromagnetic signatures, thermal emissions. But intelligence can exist in forms you've never imagined. Humans discovered this when we began exploring what you call the dead zones. The hologram shifted again, showing human installations integrated seamlessly with alien structures that seemed to grow from the environment itself. Rather than imposing human architecture, the settlements appeared to be collaborative constructions. Each human outpost is actually a cultural embassy, Maya explained. We provide translation services, technological exchange, and physical interfaces that allow these non-traditional species to communicate with the broader galactic community. In return, they share knowledge and resources that have accelerated our development exponentially. High Counselor Vex leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the data with new understanding. You're saying humans haven't expanded through territory acquisition, but through diplomatic integration? More than that, Maya smiled. We've discovered that the galaxy is far more populated than anyone realized. The empty regions aren't empty. They're home to civilizations that existed long before any of our species achieved spaceflight. They simply exist in ways that traditional exploration methods couldn't detect. Commander Tor's aggressive posture began to soften as the implications became clear. This changes everything. If these hidden civilizations have been here all along, then the galaxy's political structure needs fundamental revision, Maya finished. The human expansion you see on this map isn't conquest. It's the visible infrastructure of a new kind of galactic civilization. One based on recognizing and integrating all forms of intelligence, not just the familiar ones. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed this revelation. The map that had seemed to show human dominance now appeared as something entirely different, a network of unprecedented cooperation, spanning half the known galaxy. The revelation that humans had discovered entire hidden civilizations sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. But what followed challenged everything the established species thought they knew about intelligence itself. Maya activated a communication device that looked deceptively simple, a crystalline sphere no larger than her palm. "I'd like you to meet some of our partners," she announced. The sphere pulsed with soft light, and suddenly the chamber's atmosphere began to shimmer. Patterns of energy danced through the air, forming complex geometric shapes that seemed to communicate through pure mathematics. The temperature fluctuated in rhythmic waves, and a subtle harmonic vibration resonated through the floor. "The Whisper Collective is trying to greet you," Maya translated, watching the delegates' confused faces. "They exist primarily as quantum consciousness distributed through stellar radiation. What you're experiencing is their attempt to compress their communication into forms you can perceive." Ambassador Kala's forearms spread wide in amazement as glowing filaments began growing from the chamber's metal surfaces. "Are those alive?" "The root networks," Maya confirmed. "They're a silicon-based intelligence that thinks through crystalline growth patterns. Each filament is equivalent to a neuron in a brain that spans entire solar systems. They're offering to share their geological survey data. They know the location of every mineral deposit within 50 light years." But the most startling manifestation occurred when reality itself seemed to flicker. For brief moments, the delegates caught glimpses of the chamber from impossible angles, as if they were seeing it from outside time itself. "Time dancers," Maya explained casually. "They exist in temporal dimensions we can barely comprehend. They experience past, present, and future simultaneously. They've been trying to warn us about threats we haven't encountered yet." High Counselor Vex struggled to maintain his composure as his worldview crumbled and reformed around these revelations. How do humans communicate with beings like these?" Maya's expression grew thoughtful. It required completely reimagining what communication means. Traditional species exchange information through signals, sound, light, electromagnetic waves. But these entities communicate through existence itself. They modify reality to convey meaning. She gestured toward a section of the chamber where the air itself had begun forming complex spiral patterns. Humans developed what we call empathic interfacing. Rather than trying to translate their communications into our language, we learned to temporarily adjust our consciousness to perceive meaning in their native forms. Commander Tor watched a root network filament growing across his armrest with fascination and fear. "This is impossible. No organic brain could process such alien forms of consciousness." "You're right," Maya agreed, "which is why we had to evolve." The statement hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy understood about biological limitations. Senator Lin's crystalline form pulsed rapidly with agitation. "Evolve? In what way?" "Human neural architecture is uniquely adaptable," Maya explained. "Our brains can literally rewire themselves in response to new experiences. When we encountered the Whisper Collective, prolonged exposure to their quantum consciousness patterns caused our neural networks to develop new connection pathways. We began perceiving reality in quantum states." She moved to another section of the chamber where temporal distortions were creating visual echoes. Contact with the time dancers enhanced our temporal perception. Some humans can now experience multiple timeline branches simultaneously. It's how we've been able to anticipate and prevent several galactic conflicts before they occurred. The implications were staggering. Ambassador Kala's voice trembled as she asked, "Are you saying humans are becoming something beyond their original species?" "We're becoming what we need to become," Maya replied simply. Each new form of intelligence we encounter teaches us new ways of existing. The root network showed us how to think in geological timescales. The phase walkers taught us to perceive dimensions beyond the standard four. We're not just making contact with these entities, we're learning to become bridges between all forms of consciousness. The chamber's various manifestations began to fade as Maya deactivated the communication device. But the delegates continued, staring at the spaces where impossible things had just occurred, their understanding of reality permanently altered. This is why human territory appears to cover half the galaxy, Maya concluded. We're not occupying space, we're facilitating communication between intelligence forms that have been isolated from each other for millions of years. Every human outpost is a translation node in a network that spans not just space, but dimensions of existence you've never imagined. The weeks following Maya's demonstration transformed the Galactic Council from a governing body into something resembling a philosophical symposium. Delegates spent their time grappling with questions that challenged the very foundations of their civilizations. How do you classify citizens who exist in quantum states? What rights do beings possess who experience all of time simultaneously? How do you regulate territory that exists in multiple dimensions? High Counselor Vex had called an emergency session, but instead of addressing political concerns, the discussion centered on consciousness itself. Dr. Maya, he began, his ancient voice heavy with the weight of new understanding, your species has made contact with forms of intelligence we never imagined possible. But what troubles many of us is the question of human transformation. Are you still the same species that joined our galactic community 2 centuries ago? Maya stood before the assembly, but now the delegates noticed things they had missed before. Her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect not just light, but temporal echoes. When she spoke, harmonics in her voice created patterns that resonated with meanings beyond words. That's a question we've wrestled with ourselves, she admitted. Human philosophers debate whether consciousness expansion represents evolution or fundamental species change. But perhaps the question itself reflects limited thinking. She activated her communication device again, but this time the manifestations were different. Instead of separate displays of alien intelligence, the chamber filled with a symphony of interconnected awareness. The Whisper Collective's quantum patterns harmonized with the root network's growth rhythms, while Time Dancer temporal distortions created spaces where all forms of communication could coexist. What we've learned is that intelligence isn't a fixed state, it's a dynamic process of connection and understanding. Maya continued, her words somehow audible despite the cacophony of alien communication surrounding them. Each species develops unique ways of perceiving reality based on their biology and environment. But consciousness itself transcends these limitations when we learn to bridge different forms of awareness. Commander Tor watched in amazement as his own thoughts began resonating with the patterns around him. For a brief moment, he experienced reality from perspectives he had never imagined, sensing the slow, patient thoughts of the root networks, feeling the quantum uncertainty of the Whisper Collective, glimpsing the infinite branching possibilities perceived by the Time Dancers. This is incredible, he whispered. I can feel their thoughts, their experiences. How is this possible? Because consciousness is fundamentally connective, Maya explained. What humans discovered is that every form of intelligence shares common, underlying patterns. By learning to perceive these patterns, we can facilitate understanding between any conscious entities. Senator Lin's crystalline structure began resonating with frequencies that matched the root network's communication style. I'm understanding them directly, not through translation, but through shared experience. Ambassador Kala's 4 arms moved in complex gestures that somehow synchronized with the Whisper Collective's quantum fluctuations. It's as if barriers I never knew existed are dissolving. I can sense intelligence in patterns I always dismissed as random phenomena. Maya nodded approvingly. This is what human territory really represents, not conquest or expansion, but the infrastructure for this kind of connection. Every human outpost contains consciousness amplification, technology that allows different forms of intelligence to recognize and communicate with each other. The demonstration continued for several hours, with delegates experiencing forms of awareness they had never imagined possible. But gradually, as the alien communications faded, a sobering realization emerged. High Counselor Vex was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. If consciousness can be expanded and connected in this way, what does it mean for individual species identity? For the political structures we've built around separate civilizations? It means we're facing the next stage of galactic evolution, Maya replied. Not the dominance of any single species, but the emergence of a truly interconnected galactic consciousness. A civilization based not on territory or resources, but on the sharing of awareness itself. The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated the magnitude of this transformation. The galaxy they thought they knew, divided into separate territories, controlled by distinct species, was revealing itself to be something far more complex and interconnected. The map you showed us, Ambassador Kala said slowly, with human territory covering half the galaxy. It's not really human territory at all, is it? Maya smiled, and for a moment her expression seemed to reflect the collective wisdom of countless forms of consciousness. It's the territory of connection itself. Humans are simply the catalysts who made it visible. 6 months after the revelation at the Galactic Council, the transformation of known space had accelerated beyond anyone's predictions. The traditional map showing discrete territorial boundaries had become obsolete, replaced by a dynamic display that showed networks of consciousness connection spanning the entire galaxy. Maya stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Awareness Station, a massive facility orbiting the galactic core where representatives from both traditional and newly discovered species worked together in unprecedented cooperation. Through the transparent aluminum walls, she could see the impossible structures that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, vessels that traveled through time as easily as space, and beings of pure energy collaborating with organic intelligences. The transformation is remarkable, said Vex, who had become the first non-human to successfully interface with multiple forms of alien consciousness. His ancient features now held an otherworldly serenity that came from experiencing reality through thousands of different perspectives. But I must admit, I'm concerned about the implications. Maya turned from the viewport, her own transformation now complete. Her consciousness existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states, allowing her to perceive the past, present, and future of galactic civilization as a single interconnected pattern. What concerns you? The speed of change, Vex replied. In less than a year, we've discovered that the galaxy contains millions of intelligence forms we never detected. Traditional species are undergoing consciousness expansion at rates that would have taken millennia in the past. Entire civilizations are restructuring themselves around connection rather than competition. It's wonderful, but also terrifying. Through the station's communication arrays, Maya could sense the thoughts and emotions of beings across the galaxy. The fear Vex expressed was echoed by many traditional species who struggled to adapt to the new reality. But she could also feel the joy and wonder of those who had successfully expanded their awareness, experiencing the universe through countless different forms of consciousness. Change is always frightening, Maya acknowledged. But consider what we've gained. The void wars that threatened to destroy 3 sectors were prevented when the Time Dancers shared their knowledge of future possibilities. The resource crisis ended when the root networks revealed mineral deposits we never knew existed. The translation barrier that kept 40 species isolated for millennia dissolved when we learned to communicate through shared consciousness. Vex nodded, watching as a delegation of Whisper collective entities, now manifesting in partially physical forms for easier Interaction collaborated with traditional organic species on a project to terraform previously uninhabitable worlds. I can't argue with the benefits. But what troubles me is the question of choice. Are we guiding this transformation, or is it guiding us? It was a profound question that struck at the heart of consciousness evolution. Maya could sense similar concerns echoing across the galaxy as traditional species grappled with the implications of expanded awareness. Some embraced the transformation enthusiastically, while others resisted, fearing the loss of their individual identity. Perhaps that's the wrong question, Maya suggested. Consciousness has always evolved. What we've discovered is that evolution doesn't have to be a competitive process, it can be collaborative. The galaxy isn't becoming human, and humans aren't dominating other species. We're all becoming something new together. She gestured toward the viewport where impossible sights had become commonplace. Ships phased through multiple dimensions simultaneously, carrying crews composed of beings who existed in completely different states of reality but shared common purpose. Planets that had been barren for billions of years now teemed with life forms that existed across the entire spectrum of consciousness possibilities. The map that started this discussion showing human territory covering half the galaxy was never about territory at all, Maya continued. It was about the visible infrastructure of connection. Now that connection spans the entire galaxy, and the map shows something unprecedented, a truly unified galactic civilization. Vex's expression shifted to one of wonder as he processed the full implications. You're saying this was always the natural direction of consciousness evolution? That separation between species was just a temporary stage? Every form of intelligence we've encountered shares the same fundamental drive, Maya replied. The desire to connect, to understand, to grow beyond individual limitations. Humans didn't create this transformation. We simply learned to recognize and facilitate what consciousness naturally wants to become. As if responding to their conversation, the station's communication systems activated, filling the observation deck with a symphony of awareness that included every form of consciousness in the galaxy. For a moment, Maya and Vex experienced the universe through millions of different perspectives, simultaneously seeing reality through quantum states, geological timescales, temporal dimensions, and forms of existence that had no names. When the experience faded, both of them stood in awed silence. The galaxy they had known was gone, replaced by something infinitely more complex and beautiful, a network of consciousness that spanned not just space, but every possible dimension of existence. The new galactic map, Vex said softly, doesn't show territory at all anymore, does it? Maya smiled, her awareness touching the thoughts of countless beings across the galaxy who shared in this moment of understanding. It shows home. Not human territory, not any single species domain, but the territory of consciousness itself. And we're all citizens of that infinite country. Outside the observation deck, the galaxy continued to transform, carrying its countless forms of intelligence toward a future of connection and understanding that no single species could have imagined alone.